A number of people have asked me how I came to write this book. About 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, I wrote an article for a children's magazine called Cobblestone about music during the Civil Rights period. And it was while researching that article that I learned something I was mortified not to have known earlier. In May of 1963, I was a high school senior, and I saw on the news, the 15 minutes of national news that they had then on the 3 television stations that were then available, I saw footage of children being hosed down the street and, or excuse me, not of children, I saw footage of people being hosed down the street and people being attacked by dogs. I went to college and I majored in history. I even took a course, a seminar in Southern history. Then I taught American history in junior high and high school. And it wasn't until I wrote this article about music in the Civil Rights period several years ago that I discovered that those people were children. And when I asked around, I learned that I was not alone in my ignorance. Clearly the subject was begging for a book. I'm hoping that this book will accomplish many things. One of them is that I hope it will persuade people who remain in denial that it was children who were attacked by hoses and dogs, that it was children, because I've talked to them also, unfortunately. As Jim mentioned, I came to the archives here, but before I did that, I read. I spent 3 months reading. This is a small sampling of the books that I read. I read adult books and children's books, I read nonfiction books, and I read fiction books. I read transcripts of interviews with dozens of people, thanks to the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, and I thank Laura Anderson and Dr. Horace Huntley for that. I read countless magazine and newspaper articles, and I did much, though by no means all of that research, before I took 3 research trips to Birmingham, one with my editor, Kathy, which is very generous of them. During those trips, I went to the Civil Rights Activist Committee office, to Sunday church services. One I went to where I was the only white person and my host was looking for me, and I was sitting on one side and he was on the other, and he just randomly asked somebody, "Have you seen a white lady here?" And everybody said, "Oh yeah." In fact, among my most treasured and important pieces of information were those from the Lola Hendricks box at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. I was perversely pleased to find in the archives here letters from Bull Connor's spies who went to the mass meetings. They are a trove of information about... Oh yeah. On the 45th anniversary of the Children's March, I walked the route that they walked, from the 16th Street Baptist Church to City Hall, except of course they never made it, I did. I watched half a dozen movies, I listened to songs and sermons. In fact, one chapter in the book I wrote entirely while listening to songs. I conducted well over 100 hours of personal interviews with several of you right here, with a total of 46 people. All the while I took photographs. I'm sure many of you recognize the people right here. And I kept note cards, and I took photos, but everything I read and listened to and watched and every place I visited were just general background for the heart and the soul of this story. Sitting right here, with the sad exception of Audrey and Arnetta, are the heart and soul of this story. I thank Jan for this photograph of Audrey. She was 11. Young and innocent and sweet as she looks, she was 2 years older in this picture than the day she marched out of the 16th Street Baptist Church and went to jail for a week. I know that many of you know the events of that week very well. Many of you were participants in them. I don't know, though, if you know the particular stories of Audrey, Arnetta, Wash, and James. So it's time for a show and tell. But before I do that, I'm just going to embarrass them a little bit. Arnetta won't be embarrassed since she's not here. Here's a picture of Arnetta the year after she marched.